Well, it looks like in the ongoing conflict in the Gulf, the diplomatic rulebook just got thrown out the window. Iran has rejected the whole idea of a temporary ceasefire. Instead, they've put a much bigger, much bolder demand on the table, a permanent end to the war.
And this quote from Iran's foreign minister, it really says it all. That phrase, "we do not want to repeat what happened earlier on," that's the key to this whole thing. This isn't just some arbitrary demand. No, it's a direct response to a history of what they see as failed agreements, and it's the foundation for their entire hardline stance right now.
So to really understand this high-stakes move, here's how we're going to break it down. First, why is Iran rejecting ceasefires completely? Then, we'll look at the 3 specific conditions in their peace ultimatum. We'll dig into the cycle of conflict that's driving this whole demand, check out the American position, and finally, ask the big question. Could a mediator even begin to solve this puzzle? All right, first up, no more ceasefires. Let's get right to the heart of why these temporary fixes are just no longer an option for Iran.
This is really the core of it. The standard diplomatic tool for just pausing a conflict, the temporary ceasefire, is being tossed aside. Iran is basically signaling, hey, we're open to talks, but only if the end goal is completely different from the very start. And that fundamentally changes the entire game.
To put it really simply, a ceasefire is basically a pause button. It's temporary by its very nature. By rejecting it, Iran is saying they're done with just pausing the conflict. They want to hit the stop button for good. Okay, so if they don't want a ceasefire, what do they want? Well, Section 2 gets right into their peace ultimatum. And this isn't just some vague wish for peace. It's a list of 3 very specific conditions. So here they are. First, a complete and permanent end to the war. Pretty unambiguous. Second, they want guarantees that this cycle of violence won't just kick off again in a year. And third, compensation for damages. And these 3 points, they aren't a menu you can choose from. It's an all-or-nothing package deal. But why such a hardline stance? That brings us to Section 3, this cycle of conflict. To really get why they're making these demands, we have to look at the history they claim they're so desperate to escape. From Iran's perspective, there's this frustratingly predictable pattern. A ceasefire happens, things get calm for a bit, but then, within about a year, the conflict escalates all over again. They feel like they've been on this dangerous carousel before, and their demand for permanent peace is a clear attempt to get off for good. And we're not talking about small things here. These past escalations were major events that followed previous ceasefires, including things like U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities and some really significant missile exchanges with Israel. This history adds a lot of weight to their claim that these temporary agreements just haven't worked out. So that's Iran's side of the story. But what about the U.S. position? That brings us to Section 4, the American stance, and this is where you really see the fundamental disagreement.
The United States frames its role in all this very, very differently. Officially, their actions are a matter of self-defense, and, crucially, they've stated that these actions will continue for however long that takes. That's a completely open-ended commitment, and it's pretty much the polar opposite of Iran's demand for a permanent end.
And here you can just see the stalemate in plain terms. Iran is demanding a permanent stop with guarantees. The U.S. is asserting its right to act in self-defense indefinitely. These 2 positions are fundamentally incompatible. It's created this massive diplomatic impasse.
So if both sides are this far apart, where do we possibly go from here? This leads us to our final question. Can a mediator help? Because when direct talks stall, sometimes a third party is the only hope.
And there's actually a historical precedent for this. Oman has successfully played the role of mediator in past talks between the United States and Iran. This past relationship makes them a logical candidate to step in and at least try to get a conversation going.
But here's the thing. A mediator can only open the doors. They can't force anyone to walk through them. The fundamental problem is still the same: the substance of Iran's demands. The big question is whether the U.S. would even entertain these terms: a permanent halt, guarantees, and compensation, no matter who brings them to the table.
And so, that's where things stand. We've got Iran's historic ultimatum, born from what they see as a cycle of failed ceasefires, set against a U.S. position that seems completely incompatible. This forces us all to ask the final, critical question. Is a permanent resolution even possible, or is this entrenched cycle of conflict just the new reality?